All right, good morning, everyone. Today I'm joined by Wes Winham, the CEO of Woven, and Aszure Gray, VP of Business Development and Client Success at ML Talent Strategies. And today we just wanted to talk about the topics that are relevant for small companies, mid-sized companies, as it relates to talent during the times that we're in right now. And specifically want to hone in a bit on talent acquisition, but also the larger, bigger picture talent and HR questions that are out there right now that small and mid-sized companies are facing. And so I wanted to start by asking you, Aszure, a few questions. And as we look at this bigger picture conversation, what are you seeing and hearing right now relative to talent acquisition? What's going well and what isn't?
Good morning, Daniel. Good morning to you too, Wes. Glad you asked. There's a lot going on right now, some positives and some challenges, as you can imagine. I think I'd have to say what's really, I think, a great thing considering the last few months is that there is a lot of hiring. And with what everybody's been through and the economy overall, the world, if we really think about it from that perspective, is a really good thing. There's lots of hiring. People have managed to work out this work from home thing. I think that for tech companies especially, that was a little bit easier transition, but it took a lot of work. I mean, I'm thinking, I know what I had to do just to make sure that my technology was up and running to have meetings like this on a regular basis that actually would function properly. I hope my Wi-Fi makes it through this conversation as well. But also thinking too that the ability to work from home and to work remotely has also helped companies to realize that their geographic footprint for hiring is much broader than they thought it was at one time. And that has also really opened up the options of people that can be a part of your organization. Lastly, I'd say this is a really big one, is the opportunity to top grade, to bring in levels of talent that maybe weren't available before. And that's a really big one for the net to be cast wider, because what's been really hard, a really big challenge for everyone over the last few years with a booming economy, but especially for tech, has been the ability to get the talent that they need. There's been such a tight community and people that were available that now that's expanding a little bit. And I think that's a really big positive. That also transitions into some of the challenges that when you think about job hopping, the ghosting, some things that were going on before. Now the ability to move to another company, especially within like the tech community, for example, that's really a place where people are becoming vulnerable. There's actually top talent that is at risk. Part of the reason for that is that things have been volatile lately, whether you're talking about how a company has handled COVID-19 and all of the things that went along with that, changes in policies, working from home, layoffs, furloughs, and the social volatility lately. There's been so much going on with social issues. Not every company has handled things exactly the right way or even as well as they think they have. And so when you start to take a look at that, there are a lot of people that have been extended contingency offers that an organization may not know about. There's also a lot of people that really don't feel at home or comfortable in the culture or how things have been handled, and the organization doesn't know this. And so they could have a lot of talent that's actually a lot more at risk in their organization than they have any idea of. And so those are some really big challenges where people are staying just until the dust settles, and then you might see some of your top talent leaving.
With all of that going on, what's the impact on business owners and on leadership?
Oh, Wes, I'd say there's two really big ones in reference to that. One is that business owners are just plain overwhelmed. Everybody is. I mean, if you think about everybody you know, the past few months have just been a lot. We've been stretched really thin at home and at our places of work or our home offices, right? It's just been a lot. So the overwhelming aspect of that, and you've got the fact that they have underskilled or no HR or people internally to actually run this. So there's the overwhelmed aspect and also the cost. Fees everything from what you're paying at the store for milk to what you're paying for your talent to actually help to source them, to find them. So the hard costs and the soft costs of just your time and your energy are really a lot for business owners and leadership right now. And there's a lot of firefighting that's going into using different agencies to try and get people back on, fill positions really quickly. And the costs are actually hitting them pretty hard.
So I'm, a business leader, executive, owner of one of these companies. What actions might I take or would you recommend as a next step?
Two things really. One is to make sure that you actually stop and create some type of talent plan. Everybody is taking a look at things, reevaluating, and at ML Talent Strategies, we always recommend that you think of your business strategy as a three-legged stool, that you've got a business plan, a financial plan, and a talent plan. And if you're only reevaluating the first two and not the third, then you can be caught in the cycle where you're, again, kind of running around with your hair on fire, and it's costing you a lot more time, energy, and money than it should. So consider the aspect of, or the option of sitting down with and considering a fractional senior HR leader and outsourced HR team. What they can do for you is actually give you a lower cost than it would be to hire somebody internally. They can solve really big problems. They can take the day-to-day off your plate so that you're not as overwhelmed, give you some time back, and recommend what you need and what you don't. So actually provide you with some really good guidance that is objective because they work for you.
Thanks so much for all your insights there. That's super helpful, just like a bigger picture framing. So let's transition to Wes and Azure. What's a question you have for Wes specific as to what he and Woven are doing right now?
Well, when I think about what you're doing with Woven, you have some advice that you would give relative to hiring remote developers. Why should we trust your advice, Wes? Your expertise.
That is a very reasonable question because there's a lot of folks that are new experts on remote. They've been experts all along. We just didn't know it, right? In reality, it's complicated. So I've hired a couple hundred engineers. About a quarter of those have been remote, both US remote, Canada remote, and international remote. So I've seen both sides, hired in a dozen different cities across a lot of engineering roles. So I've seen some things that work really well and some things that maybe don't. And I've tried to learn from those, a lot of my mistakes and a little bit of others' mistakes.
Wes, what are some of the benefits of remote hiring for developers? I mean, like Azure mentioned, a lot of people are hiring remotely right now and realizing how versatile they can be. What are some of those benefits?
There are two primary benefits. There's a big benefit and a small benefit. The small benefit is logistics are easier when you're doing remote interviews. Like you can do more interviews. It's easier on the candidate. It's easier on candidates that maybe have a harder time rearranging their schedule because they're a passive candidate that's already working. You can do a lunch interview that doesn't stress them out. The logistics are a lot easier, which is generally a benefit. So that's a small benefit. That's nice. Saves a little time. You get access to candidates that maybe wouldn't be willing to go through the interview hoops if they had to take off a half day to go inside. The second benefit is the big one, and that's access to talent. Exactly as Azure said, the talent pool is much bigger. We see companies that were, I'm only hiring in my city. I'm only hiring people who are 10 minutes away, 15 minutes away. That commute really matters, to opening up the broader metro and surrounding metros. So we're seeing a trend of companies that, they really want people in the office. They now realize, well, actually, if we can get people in the office once a week or once a month, or maybe just at onboarding, then that actually works for us. We've proven that we can have a team that works well over video and over Slack and Microsoft Teams and whatever our tools are. So we're in Indianapolis. I'll use that as an analogy. If you just go out 2 hours away, you've got Cincinnati, you've got Columbus, you've got Louisville, maybe you've got Chicago, St. Louis is a stretch. So the access, the talent pool you're fishing in is 5, 10x bigger. And that means you can top grade. You have access to folks that you just would not have access to if you stuck in your metro. I don't care what metro you live in, you add in surrounding places, and you're going to have a much easier time finding someone who's passionate about your mission, about your technology, about exactly what's special about you. That access to talent is it's just so important. We see companies that are kind of not fully remote, but they're at least getting the surrounding cities. They hire faster, they're pickier. Some of our customers that are in that situation, they're rejecting more candidates than our other companies are even getting applied. They're rejecting these really great engineers because they're just not the right culture fit. And that's a really fortunate position to be in.
So Wes, those are some really great benefits, but what's actually more challenging about hiring remotely?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge because we rely a lot on just being people around each other in a physical space to get a read. That creates conviction. So a lot of hiring success is creating buy-in for the hiring team, for that person to support them so that when they start, everyone's excited and they get the support they need to be successful. That conviction is like it's the X factor of hiring. We talk about we're interviewing people, but maybe just as much we're getting our team excited about these people. And if we're not deliberate about recreating that, it's likely that we actually get worse at hiring, even though we have better talent. So that means we need to redesign our interviews. We need to think about not just lifting and shifting our in-person process to online. Some things like, okay, what about a common interview practice would be to go to lunch with a candidate, just to kind of get the feel, get buy-in, get everyone excited. And how do you do a remote lunch? Like, how do you replace that thing that you just kind of been doing and you never really thought about? So those are things that they're challenging. It also feels more transactional. We all exist in this box. So I think it's incumbent upon us to do more work to create some of those, softer interactions, to also improve our data, because fraud is actually a little bit easier remote. So I'm sure everyone has heard these stories of one interviewer talks to someone else and they get to the next interviewer and it's a different person taking the interview. So things like using video on rather than just using phone are really important to catch the tiny percent of people that are going to cheat. But if we let those folks cheat, then it disadvantages all the vast, overwhelming majority of honest people that are just trying to get the next place for them. So these are just some of the challenges. It's when we change things, some things get harder, some things get easier, and we have to put in a little effort. That's things that get harder.
Great.
So Wes, you are working within an industry and companies where the profile of the typical candidate is a white male that's introverted, and that's been statistically shown. So if I'm an owner or leader and as a company and I want to attract a diverse pool of candidates, what is Woven doing, and what are your ideas around attracting that diverse pool?
Yeah, this is so important. An extroverted engineer is one who stares at your shoes, right? Diversity engineering is hard. There is no magic bullet here, but it's important, and it's a thing that you can impact if you put in effort. So some of the things that we've seen our customers and people talk to be successful, I think the first step is you need to be in front of the right people. So if you're not on the right job boards, if you're just relying on your applicant tracking system's auto post, you're going to get mediocre to poor results at best. You have to get out there. You need to find job boards that are specifically targeted at groups that you're trying to increase your candidate pool on. If you're doing direct sourcing, I think taking diversity into account, like all of our networks, all of our job boards, they all have different biases, some overlapping. So I think it's a reasonable thing to do to try to counter some of that bias with your action. So that's one thing that really works. So if you're just posting on your ATS, you're going to have a bad time. The next thing is, okay, now I'm in front of people. Is my message going to resonate? And here, I think a common mistake I see is trying to create a one-size-fits-all job ad. We want to you want to be the lowest common denominator, resonate with everyone. You're going to resonate with nobody. So a tactic I see folks having a lot of success with is creating different versions of a job ad. So for an engineer, this might mean we make one job ad that's very mission focused. It's like, what is our benefit to the world? Another job ad might be more slanted towards hard technical problems. So those are just a couple of different lenses you can take. Think of what's special about your team, your mission, your company, your problems, and build a job ad that's shorter and targeted at that, and post both of them, post 3 of them. That's the thing, that's a technique we see really juicing the diversity of candidate pool. We also generally, in software engineering, if you can work with your hiring manager to think like, what is really the minimum experience we need? Like, we need a capability. We need someone hitting the ground running. We don't need years of experience, because of the more you're able to define the capabilities that you need from an engineer, the more you're going to be able to find an exceptional earlier career engineer, and that candidate pool is much more diverse. If you're hiring engineers with 10 years of experience, that candidate pool is less diverse. The pipeline is different. So making those changes can have a big impact. And the next thing is, who are you excluding on purpose? So who are you, when you add requirements, kind of well-known psychological fact is if you add, there are people across groups differ in certain personality traits. One of them is conscientiousness. That differs particularly between women and men. Women are much less likely to apply to a job that has lots of requirements because they will self-select out if they don't meet all the requirements. That's not the case with men. And this is like on average, these are overlapping distributions. But on average, you're going to shift your candidate pool more male if you have lots of requirements. And you might just be like not thinking a lot of those requirements. And you and I both know that those aren't actual requirements, but really paring that down to the 3 or 4 things that matter most. And then the next thing, and when you're paring down requirements, that means you really need, if you're not just looking on years of experience, you really need a way to see if someone has the capabilities you need so they can hit the ground running, be successful. So this is when a good interview loop comes in. At Woven, we do capability-based assessments. So you are writing an email and responding to it to solve a technical problem. You are troubleshooting a system that looks like the type of system you're going to do. You can build these. Engineering teams all over the place will build them as take-home exercises. Having one of those that you're confident in allows you to lower that like years of experience bar and increase the diversity of your candidate pool while also being confident in your hires. We call these folks hidden gems, folks that are below what you might have wanted to see on a resume, but they can really do the job. And finding someone like that earlier in their career that's on a really steep learning trajectory could absolutely change your team. Both from a diversity standpoint, from a skill set perspective, from a like, it's just really fun to work with people who are just like kicking butt and learning fast and passionate about what they do. And having a more capabilities-based interview loop gives you ability to hire those type of people. And it just feels really good to give somebody a chance who deserved it and then takes it and does great things.
Well said. Thanks.
Absolutely. I appreciate hearing all of that from you, Wes. So if we're thinking about this, are there other things that actually separate companies that are making these hires really well from the companies that are struggling from your perspective?
Yeah, this is tough because I understand recruiters and talent acquisition folks are under a lot of pressure. Sometimes they don't have control over the things they would like. But if I wanted to just paint in broad strokes, so the more corporate the job ad, the application process, the first touch as a candidate looks, versus the more we'll call it startup-y, but more like mission-oriented, personal, you're going to have a better time over here on this end of the spectrum. If you are just posting on the approved corporate job boards with the long job requirements that include how much you can lift as a software engineer, and that's like a prominent feature, you're gonna do worse at recruiting top talent, folks that are really going to move the needle for your team. So I know we can't always control all of those things, but where we can, push to making a job ad more human, using human language in our follow-ups and communication. So this is, sometimes we have a tendency to want to dress up our language and make it sound more authoritative and corporate. And in reality, that's not a thing that resonates particularly with software engineers. If that really is your culture and you're not going to change that, and that's a deal breaker, I think that you got to be authentic to your team. But if you really are, you can let that humanness like resonate out in all of your communications. Candidates see it and they feel it, and it's different, and you have better conversion rates through your funnel. You have more applications. So letting what's different about you shine, especially about the mission and the people, that really makes a difference.
Great point. I don't think that kind of language ever resonates really with anyone.
I am skeptical that it does, but sometimes we have constraints.
Agreed.
So Daniel, I want to hear from you. So what are the major challenges small companies face who are they're lifting their hiring freezes? It's like things are about to fire back up. What's hard about that?
Yeah, so both of you have hit on some of the points. I would say that just in short, they're inundated with resumes and people that are interested in their job just because of how the level of unemployment that is there now. So I would say it's a good problem that, like you all said, that there's a lot more candidates to choose from. But at the same time, we're hearing from a lot of business owners and leaders who are overwhelmed by just the sheer volume and are asking that question, like, how do I wade through all of this volume? How do I create a scoring system, to get the right candidates? They probably either need Woven to help do that for them, or they need someone on ML Talent's team to help them in the search process. So but I think what we're trying to do, if that's not an option for them, is to help them to just with some key tips and tricks to really get that candidate pool down to a reasonable amount. So the second piece is clients are really struggling with remote interviewing, and you all hit on this as well. So the humanness that kind of comes through when you're in person, it's a little bit difficult to hit when you're on a Zoom call like this. And so yeah, that's another challenge that they're facing. And then I would say that the third challenge is integrating a person into their team. So if they aren't like a Woven or some of our other clients that were already remote before COVID-19, they are having to figure out, like, how do we integrate this new person into our team when the ways that we did this before were all in person. So those are the main challenges right now.
And so what do you recommend for those challenges then, Daniel?
Yeah, so I hit on a couple. One would be finding a scoring system that works for candidates, that's allows you to breeze through that volume quickly, and to also find some resources like what Woven shares publicly. I mean, to help you to screen in the right candidates that you want as well, and maybe like some tips to find those hidden gems. And the second piece is we I'll just tell a story here, but one of our clients used a lot of public job boards prior to post positions, and they're just getting inundated with people that weren't necessarily hidden gems, but more just weren't qualified and applying for everything that came their way. And so we're trying to help them find more creative ways to still get a good volume of diverse candidates, but also to really hone in on the quality of that. And so one example is there's a client that works in a very specific niche of Salesforce consulting, and so they need very technical Salesforce expertise, and so they have built a talent pipeline based on the people that are in the Salesforce communities that they're a part of, that they're getting to know through chats and just talking about different projects together, conferences, and utilizing LinkedIn and their network as well to get the message out is another suggestion that we're giving. So those are the main two. And then the other piece is, I mentioned the interviewing process being difficult when it's a remote interview, when you're accustomed to in person, and it's being authentic as the hiring manager, as the leader, and in sharing your own humanness and trying to invite that humanness out of the candidate that you're talking to, and really do like using some strategies there when you're talking to them of like, what are 3 ways, you know, when I go into this call that I really want to get to know someone outside of just like the, you know, the main interview questions to figure out if they're qualified for the position. And so coming up with those 3 questions in advance of like, what do you really want to know about this candidate and who they are, you know, that would come out when you're over a lunch time, as opposed to when you're sitting in front of a screen like this. So an example would just be like asking about kids or dogs or cats, or what you see in the background. You know, like you probably see like my bookshelves and art piece in the background. It's just making conversation about, hey, tell me more about that art piece that's in your background. What is, like, where'd you get it? What's it about? So to draw out the humanness of the candidate, I think helps. And then the final piece is really sharing how your company and your culture, your people are adapting to the changes. And because frankly, the candidate is interviewing you and your company as well. And so they're feeling uncertain about, you know, looking for a job during COVID-19. It's not a fun place to be. It's probably anxious and anxiety filled place for a lot of people. And so they're wanting to hear authentically, like, what are you doing as a company to handle the challenges? You know, what's your return to office plan? What's working remotely look like right now? What accommodations are you making for people that are high risk? You know, so just really sharing authentically from a company perspective of what you're doing right now. So yeah, those are solutions we're recommending.
Make a lot of
Very
sense.
true.
I love to hear that you're deciding on the score of what you're looking for in a candidate before you start screening is awesome. We love rubrics. I love one of the tactics I've seen is in the screener application, asking a couple of those really important questions. It's a Salesforce admin, say, hey, I'm trying to check lead source and we're not getting good data on that. What are some custom fields you might set up there? Something that someone can answer in a tweet and they can give you way more data about who's going to be a great fit for that. That's awesome. What are a few questions, main questions that your clients are asking you right now?
Yeah, so this will take us kind of away from more like the hiring piece and more into like the core of our business, which is HR outsourcing. So we provide the entire HR function for companies. So think payroll, benefits, compliance, you know, for small companies, mostly under 100 employees. And so these prospective clients are asking, like, how can we create efficiencies and cut costs, honestly? And so I would say 90% of the time our solution can cut costs in the long run. So we save an average of $450 a month for small companies who use us, compared to doing all those functions I mentioned on their own and working with multiple vendors. So they're looking for cost-cutting solutions. And the piece about creating efficiencies is, you know, we have a lot more time because we're not driving, you know, to appointments. We're not going out to lunch, you know, all of these things that take a lot of time. However, I think the operational intensity of a lot of business has increased because especially operations leaders and executives are having to figure out how to manage remote employees. And that goes into my kind of second question. A lot of folks are asking, like, how do we manage a remote team? We haven't done this before. And so there's a lot of operational changes that have to be thought through and be intentional about when you're managing a remote team compared to when you're seeing everybody in the office on a daily basis. And then finally, it's the last question is help with all of the changing laws and that are continually being updated. So I think, Congress just passed a extension of the PPP loan forgiveness period and just changed some details of that. And they've, recently opened up for more applications after the first round was closed. And so it's like, help us with this report, help us figure out like what the new law is regarding EFMLA is the law, but it's extended leave for people that are caring for folks that are suffering from COVID. Help us figure out how we need to manage our employees in this way if they have that situation. Help us with an office reopening plan, and so it's a lot of the tactical pieces of what's the result of a global pandemic on their business and how they manage their team and operations during the time. So
Let me ask you this, because I think one of the things that's a big challenge for companies is, and I don't know that I touched on it or dug into it, but you guys mentioned it too, is rebuilding their onboarding. I mean, really the entire onboarding process, which is actually all the way from posting an ad to your interview process to training and actually the onboarding really kind of their first 30 days at a company. And those are typically, those have been built for in person, right?
Right.
And now trying to transition to doing it this way. And really you have to completely revamp that to be built for virtual. You can't just kind of try to shove that, into a virtual setting and expect it to function perfectly. It doesn't. And so that's one of the things that really has to be done right now, is completely overhauling that for fitting the virtual environment. And unfortunately, we are anticipating, they're saying that we might have a second wave, or that we really might not be completely rid of COVID until 2022. And so rebuilding your onboarding process to meet the new environment, the virtual environment, is something that's absolutely essential so that you can actually get the candidates you need, get them onboarded, for things to be efficient and for it to be not just efficient, but effective. And that's really where all of these things come in. And for people to start to think of their entire talent acquisition process and thinking about talent beyond acquisition. I know that's really our focus today, but really thinking about, if they don't consider the parts after, it's kind of like having a hole in your bucket where you get people in, but then you can't keep them. And that's really one of the big challenges that people tend to have, especially in the tech community, where you have a lot of that job hopping, because I get into an organization and I really like it, but boy, the grass is greener over there. And then I leave and I move around. So there's so much more to it that goes along with not just acquiring that talent, but can you actually develop and engage them so that you can keep them? Retaining talent is probably just as big of a challenge, but one that comes later, that needs just as much thought, energy, and investment.
What are some of the things you see companies need to do as they're shifting from co-located onboarding to remote onboarding?
When it comes to remote onboarding, you've actually got to adjust your tools and start the process over again. So when it comes to remote onboarding, there's actually things you can do, software that can be used, for example, for having that remote conversation for a phone screen, for example. That's usually where things begin. You also can give some thought to, when it comes to the remote onboarding, of having these types of conversations, as you mentioned, Daniel, kind of including the humanness. Why exactly can't we have lunch this way? So having conversations like that and including that type of conversation, asking those questions about people, but really thinking about the ability to make the process more efficient and less clunky, where people are looking, those job boards, as you mentioned, to bring in the diversity. There's aspects of the remote onboarding process that you can't only think of it from the purpose of efficiency or from the aspect of the technology, but also what are we trying to accomplish in the end, and make sure that there are different steps in terms of the journey to actually get you there. I'm not sure if that made sense or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The efficiency must be a straight line, but the journey itself must zigzag in order to hit all the points.
Yeah, if we don't map what that journey is and like get deliberate about the journey, we're gonna have trouble. The onboarding can be kind of a dumpster fire in person, and it'll be okay because someone will walk over to your desk. But if we're remote, there's no desk to walk over. Folks are kind of on their own, so it's up to us to help them map that journey.
There needs to be a communication rhythm for that. That's one of the things that actually there's been really good data that shows during COVID, communication actually went up. And so that's something that a lot of companies need to make sure they don't lose as people start to even return to the workplace, is that they stay connected to each other and have a communication rhythm of a ping that tells me it's time for me to reach out and check in with Daniel and see how he's doing. Or we have a 15-minute huddle every Thursday so that I actually can just have a conversation and see how things are going. So Wes, how have you been? Keep a quick little note to make sure that I ask again about what's been going on with you lately from the last conversation that we had. And that's actually keeping people more connected than they were even walking over to a desk. Go figure.
So what do both of you, the conversations in sales, when you have an owner right now that is, or a leader that's like thinking about cutting costs, and they perceive kind of what each of you do as like an extra thing, and it's like, I'm going to do this myself and figure it out because I have to cut costs. So like, how do you respond to that, like, objection or question when that comes up in a sales conversation right now?
Okay, I'll take that one first. What we do, if you think about it, I mean, it's kind of in that same category as what you mentioned, Daniel. We actually can bring a huge amount of value and help a client to lower costs, hard and soft costs. So for one, we are kind of all of that HR that's not payroll, that's not benefits, but you're really thinking about having a fractional head of HR who can make decisions for you, who can execute on things and help you solve big problems, in addition to managing relationships with folks and vendors like yourself, helping them to make decisions about implementing something like the software that Wes provides, not because I make money off of it or I sell it, but because I can let them know that's actually a wise investment for their company, or let them know that they are getting a really good value working with a PEO like FullStack when it's time for them to transition to a larger benefits offering. Those are the kinds of things that we can help them to guide them through, because we're not tied to anyone else. We work for them. And they can hire a fractional head of talent, like an outsourced CFO, for example, same type of concept, but it doesn't cost as much as it does to hire someone in-house. So they still get our time, our attention, our focus, and we are held accountable to the same types of metrics that an internal employee would be, but we're less expensive. And so we're just as focused, just as accountable, but they don't have to pay us benefits, they don't have to pay us sick leave or vacation time, and they get the benefits of our experience. Everyone on our team has a minimum of 15 years experience in what they do, some all the way up to 30. And so we've been there, we've done it, and we can provide them the advice as well as an expertise, as well as an extra set of hands, and help them cut costs.
A fractional model can make a lot of sense when you're not quite ready for being all grown up and having your own full-time person, but you need help. On our side, we're only there are customers, there are prospects that are stopping hiring. They are in protection mode. They've lost 90% of the revenue. There are folks that are just not going to be hiring, and we've got nothing for them. We just can help them, give them advice, moral support, but that's all we can do. So if you're in that boat, we've had customers pause contracts, stop contracts, because instead of hiring, they're going to hire 20 engineers, and now they have no revenue, and they're considering layoffs. We're not a good use of funds in that situation. For other folks, if they're hiring, they're doing it because they need more throughput on engineering. They're going to spend money to build more stuff to help the business. In that case, we are a way to save money, save engineering time, get more of what they want, which is for product build. They want less on headhunter fees. They want to spend less time on things that are not engineering team building product. So we're able to deliver more throughput in those cases.
So, yeah, I appreciate those questions and just the opportunity to share. And I'm thankful to both of you for the wisdom that you bring in the particular specialties and niches that you're serving. And I think this is super important for small and mid-sized companies to consider as they are lifting hiring freezes and as they're considering how do we move forward, with the continuation of a global pandemic and this new normal that we're all trying to figure out. And so thankful for your time, both of you, and your wisdom and expertise. So thanks.